Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne Allman, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. Trusting yourself in a world full of noise. Hi, friends. It's Dianne here at Someone Gets Me, and I have a really good friend of mine here to talk to you today, and her name is Shannon Allman. You probably recognize her last name, but she can tell you about that. Anyway, the thing about Shannon that I love so much is her acute sensitivity and care and compassion. Like when I spend time with her, I always feel soothed and calm. And I'm sure that's not how her life has always been. So something that she's doing is really working with her sensitive nervous system. And I'm going to ask her a bunch of questions about it. And I'm hoping she'll tell us some good stories about how she has created the beautiful life that she has today. So Shannon, thank you for coming to Someone Gets Me today and sharing your wisdom and whatever else comes out of us in this conversation.
Thank you. I knew I was going to get emotional. I'm always so grateful to have a chance to talk to you. So thank you for having me today.
Oh, this is going to be so fun. Anyway, so I want to start off with a question that I think feels like the biggest one. And then we can kind of dissect it down from there, if you don't mind. And what I'm wondering about is high capacity people, gifted people like yourself and others that you know. And when you have a high capacity person and they're trying to function in this world that has got so much static in it of all these different levels, what are some things that you've learned how to do over the time to moderate, heal, work through, navigate that kind of interference to be able to be your authentic self?
It reminds me of something that you said to me in a conversation once, which was I was saying that when people ask me similar questions, I usually start by prefacing, you might not like the answer because I've had to change so much. And you said, I usually tell people they only have to change one thing, and that's everything. Because it's been a full-time job for about a decade now of learning the tools in my emotional toolbox to tune out the noise, get centered, be grounded, be able to function, be able to support myself. So my entire life is built around rituals and routines. I have a morning and evening routine that I created to make my inner child feel safe. So that even when I don't want to do the thing, I don't want to make my bed or go to bed early, put the screen away, I know that my little inner child really needs to know that there's an adult in the room taking care of her. And of all of the things that I've done, I've been in therapy for almost a decade consistently. I meditate daily for about 15 years now. I get my morning sunshine. I walk. I exercise. I prioritize my sleep. I eat healthy. I journal. I make art. I get out into nature. My entire life really requires these things of me. And even with all of those things, the morning and evening routines seem to be the anchor that is sending a message to my nervous system that no matter what else happens in between the morning and evening, there's going to be a bookend to get me back feeling safe into my body out of the ruminating mind.
Oh, that's great. I call them bookends. And so I think of the same thing. Like I have to have those routines, those things that are stable. So no matter what the world throws at me, I know these things.
Yes.
Yep. I know. I love it. I love how you said that. And I'm like, oh yes, I think about that. So you have a degree in journalism, right? From the University of Florida.
Right.
So we're both Gators. Yay, go Gators.
Yeah.
It's in our blood. We can't help it. And so how has the studies you've done in journalism really helped you through your whole process of healing and caregiving and being more and more and more authentic.
Mm.
How has that helped you?
That's a great question because let me think about that for a second. It's fascinating that it comes up now because my life skyrocketed into this whirlwind of a very big life with my late husband right after I graduated college. So I worked full time for 6.5 years to get that 4 year degree. And then right when I graduated, my life went into this wild path. And then after he died, things got so hairy and hard for so many years that now, just in this past little while, I've been thinking about how no one can take my education away from me. I will have it for the rest of my life. And I'm just now really remembering, first of all, a big part of education I've learned is just showing up. Not even just what I learned in the classes, but just keeping, even when it felt like there was no end in sight, 6.5 years getting a 4 year degree, I just kept working at it. So it really built confidence in me that I can do hard things, I can do things on my own independently. And lately, as I'm navigating this world with health challenges and disabilities, I'm really grateful to be living at a time where I can do these virtual conversations and still get my stories and what I've learned out into the world as a disabled person from the comfort of my home. And so a lot of these classes that I took in journalism school about journalistic reporting, interviewing, it is really helping me these days. And also being able to research with the understanding that peer reviewed sources, like times have changed a lot since I graduated, and so being able to know how to research and what is trustworthy has been really helpful in a time of this 24/7 news cycle.
Yes, that is so true. The critical thinking and the ability to ask the next question and look for what's valid in a way that's meaningful. I don't know if that's taught anymore, but I think it's so important, so important.
Yeah.
So when you got out of college and you hit the whirlwind life, did
Mhm.
you lose any part of Shannon in that?
Gosh. All through the years that my husband was alive, my close friends would say to me, wow, I'm really surprised that you haven't changed, that all of this whirlwind hasn't changed you. And I took that as a compliment. Um, and then as the years have gone on, and I look back, I was 23 when I met him. I'm going to be 38 this week. So I've got some time and perspective and some wisdom earned to look back. And I was in this interesting position where just by being next to him, there were eyes on me, on us. There were cameras. There were times when we would show up at a hotel at 4 o'clock in the morning and sleepily get off a tour bus and have paparazzi in our face. And it definitely slowly and insidiously put a pressure on me to look a certain way. I put a lot of pressure on myself to have pretty hair and pretty skin and great style and good posture and to speak eloquently. And I didn't really understand until therapy that really I was masking. Right. A
Mhm.
lot of it was I did not know that I'm autistic. I did not know that I have ADHD. I didn't understand CPTSD. I didn't understand the narcissistic abuse I had gone through when I was much younger. And so I did lose some of my spontaneity and my freak flag flying with him. I was very much myself with him, 100% with him. But when we were out in the public, I definitely got molded into what I felt was more palatable.
Right. So you had to mold yourself into also what the public wanted to see, you know,
Completely.
because with that level of fame, there's that veil, not only around him, but around you too, right? Of this is what you're supposed to be. And in the people's fantasy, this is what you guys are. So there was, I'm sure it affected both of you, right?
Completely. I mean, we also, the significant age difference and his history in the public eye already brought extra scrutiny. He'd been married multiple times. So there was already extra scrutiny on our relationship in
Right.
general. And I always say that Gregg Allman was a persona that he created to survive fame. So I always have these memories of going to an interview with him where he would be being interviewed by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And we would just be talking, Gregory and I, and then he would go on camera and he would become Gregg Allman. His aura shifted. He was like the size of his body seemed to change. The way that he spoke was different. And then the cameras would turn off and I would say, "Who's that guy? Who's that guy?" And he'd say, I've got a lot of practice at this. And there is a lot of pressure. I remember his best friend of 50 years saying to me, "Baby girl, do you know why I'm always so adamant about making sure Gregory doesn't have a hair out of place or a speck of lint on his shirt or a scuff on his shoe? Because if he does, people will talk negatively about him." There is a very high level of scrutiny that takes a village to create the image that I remember Gregory saying to me one time, we're on the road every night. We're playing a different show every night in a different city. But a lot of people who are coming to shows, they save up their hard-earned money and they maybe going to one show every few months or so. And it's a big deal and a celebration for them. He said, so they're usually putting on their best clothing. They want to go out and have a good time. And they expect that of us. So let's get you some leather and fringe, you know.
Right. Because it is what the people expect, and I've traveled with some of the artists that I've worked with. That is what happens. And there's that's why I call it like a veil. It's like what's expected and wanted. And when we get off the tour bus in the middle of the night and we're all exhausted, there's a moment when the cameras turn on or the lights turn on the stage that everything changes. And then everybody can be themselves, but in the performance, he was himself. And in his interview, he was himself. And when he's with you alone, he was with himself. And the cool thing is that when you're a gifted person, all of those pieces fall into the mosaic perfectly,
Yes.
And so I heard somebody say one time about artists in general that, oh well, they live lies, they're all living a lie. Some people live a lie, but I think that a lot of the times people don't realize that there's so much more nuance, and that's why I call it like a mosaic. There's all these different pieces, but they fit together to make this whole. If he didn't have a way to decompress, he wouldn't have made it like he did. If he didn't have people helping him learn how to speak in a certain way or do things, he wouldn't have made it where he was to gift his gift as much as he got to. At least that's
conversation in therapy. I had that conversation in therapy this morning about the idea of containing multitudes. And I do internal family systems parts work. So the idea that we have so many different parts of us. And I was saying that the more that I put myself out into the public eye, just on my own social media, after really almost a decade of isolation and hiding away, that again, I had put this pressure on myself that I needed to be as eloquent as Audrey Hepburn. I needed to have Grace Kelly's. There was this high pressure of at all times, I must be very poised. And what we were talking about in therapy this morning is that we, as gifted people, as artists, as women, we can and do contain multitudes. And it's not being insincere to fluctuate and surf between different multitudes.
Yes. I mean, does your handwriting change paragraph to paragraph?
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, I remember I was in high school when I first noticed that in myself. I'm like, look at this, every paragraph is different handwriting. And I wrote it all, and it's like all those things that as I have been growing over my lifetime, I'm like, look, there's all the clues in all of their cute little ways, I just think it's so fun. So I want to talk a little bit about the power of storytelling. And is telling our story, kind of storytelling, and how that helps us with the expression of our identity.
Mm.
I think I think so many gifted people hide their story, hide who they are because of the noise, or they get distracted because of the noise. And so if somebody's listening and they're feeling that kind of I'm stuck and I want to start to show up for myself a little bit, but it's kind of noisy out there, do you have any suggestions that you would say to them about how they can use telling their story, maybe in different pieces or whatever, that may help them, in my mind, kind of thaw out a little bit so that they can get a little inner movement?
Yeah, I love this question. First of all, I created a social media account where I blocked everybody that I know. Because when I did have the people that I know having access, and I was speaking about my grief and my trauma and late diagnoses, when people that I know personally wouldn't engage or comment or like, or when I would start hearing through the grapevine that people were whispering, it was really uncomfortable and triggering and activating. So I created this account. And I recommend this to a lot of people to start an account online where you block everybody that you know. And there's something about, I do video journaling. So when I was too tired in early grief and caregiver burnout, autistic burnout, I couldn't journal anymore, which I've done my whole life. So I started recording myself on my phone journaling. I was in extreme isolation, not really talking to anybody. And at the time, it was so challenging to be in isolation and I was depressed and all of the things. But now I have a decade where I can watch how my face has changed through my healing. I can type in on my phone July 20th, 2012, and see what I was journaling about that day. So I can watch my own story. I can listen to my own story and patterns that come up. So both video journaling and starting an account where you block everybody. And there's this term that comes up a lot these days, of visibility wound, that a lot of us have wounds of showing up authentically. And I hear sometimes when people are trying to do anything publicly, they want growth quickly. They want a lot of followers quickly, a lot of buyers quickly. And what I have found is that slow growth allows you to get more comfortable with being on camera or sharing your art, sharing your writing, whatever part of your story it is that you're sharing. And for me, I built up this small, loyal following that now, as my account grows, these people may decide that they don't like me, they don't like what I have to share, but there's this small, subset of people who are leaving kind comments. And I have dealt with so much bullying, online bullying, for about 14 years now, that I've also watched myself in real time evolve how I deal with it. Where in the beginning, it was like all my childhood wounds. I was bullied as a child. So being bullied was deeply triggering, and I would be so sad and hurt. And then I started getting to the anger phase, and I would get reactive and I would lash back out at the trolls. Sometimes I would pay money to get people's background checks online. I would call them at their home and say, "Would you like to say to me what you said to me on the internet today?" I was very reactive in earlier grief. And now I have dealt with because a lot of the bullies, they're invalidating my story. I'm telling the truth of my story and I'm getting a lot of really nasty backlash. And now I've dealt with it long enough that I implore people to remember that if you are showing up in the world with any substance whatsoever, there are going to be people who are triggered. Their insecurities are going to be activated. So I look now at any kind of bully or troll as evidence that I'm showing up. Just the very fact that someone is leaving a nasty comment shows me that I am showing up. And I feel like I've earned a superpower these days where usually whatever somebody is being nasty to you about, they are exposing their own insecurities. And I think it was Dr. Maya Angelou who said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you.
Mhm.
And Tina Turner talked about how it was coming out about her story that liberated her. And I kept a lot of my story so secret and shame filled for so long that when I finally started coming out, particularly about autism, that's the only other way I could find other autistic people. And my life now, it's like this flower. I had to do the scary thing and tell my story truthfully. And that is what has finally helped me find people like you.
Right, right, exactly. And you have to do the scary thing. And I think that the bullies, because I get bullied all the time. I get people, and what's your IQ? Stuff like that.
Totally.
Oh, whatever. It used to trigger me years ago, and now I just laugh and say, yeah, you're telling on what I say is you're telling on yourself.
That's it.
Because they are. That's what they're doing. They're telling.
That is.
And so I just smile now. But there's a process in that. And so in the beginning, um, it takes a little bit of work to not be triggered by those things. And I love that you said about blocking all the people you know. It's funny because I started this Someone Gets Me channel and this podcast without really telling anyone about it. I just started doing it. A few of my close friends knew and stuff, but I just started sharing it. And within 21 days, it was in 21 countries. And it's now in over 100 countries. But it's just because I think my heart, and people want to hear the authenticity and they want to connect, especially if they've not been connected very much. And sometimes we connect around those things that are the labels, even though everybody experiences them differently,
Definitely.
right? I think so. So, what kinds of things do you do for fun?
Hmm.
Like that brings you joy, kind of fun?
Gosh. Well, it's still evolving because let me see how I want to say this. My favorite thing to do is to drive through the back roads of a rural area, go to a mom and pop barbecue spot, a thrift store out in the middle of nowhere. I love going to the mountains and going to the waterfalls, really feeling like I can step back in time. I love being around architecture and ways of life that make me feel like I'm away from the noise. I need that so badly. That really is if I have free time, that is what I'm doing. I've always loved live music. I have a harder time with the crowd. I am much more sensory sensitive than I used to be, and I started drinking and doing drugs really young that I'm not using as a number anymore. So I don't have that same sensitivity block that makes crowds harder, but I do love like a small live music show. I love the farmers market, which also has local musicians and I'm a big reader. I'm a voracious reader. I'm much more these days small group. I like one-on-one or maybe, 3 or 4 people, deep conversation. I am always starving for really deep conversation rather than just, again, I started drinking early, so I was going to bars and bartending really young, which is just not my favorite thing to do anymore.
that's that's not on the dance card anymore.
Yeah.
Well, you just reminded me of when I first moved up here to North Carolina and I went to a farmer's market in Black Mountain, actually, right outside of Asheville. And I'm like, I want to go. And it's a couple hours from here. I'm going to take this little adventure. And I'm walking through the farmer's market and all of a sudden I hear music and I'm looking around and just as fast as could be, they set up this little tent and there was upright bass and two other musicians and they were playing all this beautiful music. And I'm walking around enjoying the music, thinking of all the musicians I know and how cool is this. And I didn't expect this, I'm just kind of putting this all together. And then I noticed that the music had stopped and they were gone. It was like they dropped in, they played a set, and then they were gone. And I'm like, I love this. It was just so real and it was beautiful. It was
Yeah.
beautiful music. It happened another time when I was picking blueberries out in a field someplace around here. I don't even know where it was exactly at this point. And I was out in this blueberry field, and all of a sudden I heard music, and it sounded like somebody had like like an old school boombox or something. And these people had set up a little one of those little canopy tents, and they were playing their music out in the middle of a blueberry field.
It's actually what I did when my social anxiety had gotten really bad after everything I went through. And then COVID, I started going to the farmer's market every single Saturday just to be around people. And I can look now at how when I first started going, I had a lot of panic going to the farmer's market. Now I've made friends with the farmers and it's my favorite thing to do during the week.
Right. Yes. Totally different. So you were a caregiver for quite some time.
Mm.
And were you aware of CPTSD and autism and giftedness and neurodivergence when you were a caregiver? Or did you learn about it after?
I knew, no, I had no language for it. I knew Gregory and I said that we had always felt like aliens, and I had never met anybody else. I have now. You too. You hear that thunder? That was him. I know, I'm still up here. Yeah, so I remember really connecting over that we just felt so different from people, and we both had our trauma showed up in similar ways. So I knew that we had both gone through childhood trauma, and I knew that one of the things that we connected over the most was that we are people who, on one hand, we have a deep, intimate relationship with God. So we believe that we're created by God, designed by God the way that we were meant to be. And we find confidence in that and how we show up in the world. And have gotten a lot of feedback throughout our lives of people saying to us, gosh, you just seem so confident. You just seem so put together. And then there's this other side of us who has complex trauma with deep insecurities, deep abandonment wounds, fear of abandonment. So I didn't have language for it. I knew that things like when I had my first intense panic attack in front of him, which I've had panic attacks my whole life, he was the first person to co-regulate with me. I didn't have the word for that then. And I remember thinking that he was going to break up with me because I had this wild, massive panic attack in front of him. And he said, very matter of factly, he's like, babe, you're an artist and a visionary, and you have visions in your mind of how you want things to go. And when they don't go that way, sometimes it gets really uncomfortable in your body, and you just need to let that out. Just so matter of fact. So yeah, no, we didn't have language for it, but I knew that he was
Yeah.
able to meet me emotionally, psychologically in ways that I hadn't experienced before.
Right. And he created that safe space for you because his explanation was like perfect. Right. And because he lived it too.
He did.
Right? And so, but he didn't do that. He didn't dismiss what you were going through and saying, well, I've done that too, and it's okay, and blah, blah, blah. He didn't do that at all. He like gave you your space and honored you and then created the safety for you, which is a gift that transcends words in my mind.
I miss it so much.
Yes, I'll bet you do.
Yeah.
I'll bet you do, because there's something transformationally beautiful in that.
Completely. Oh, that's the best way that I would put it.
Yeah, that's how it feels. Yeah. So, what did you do to take care of yourself while you were taking care of him? Or did you not take very good care of Shannon? Like, how did that work?
So we met in January of 2012. A couple of months later, we got engaged. And a couple of weeks later, he got diagnosed with terminal cancer and he was given 12 to 18 months to live. He wound up living almost 6 more years. And the first part, so we were together about 5.5 years. And for the first years, he managed the cancer was like we went to the Mayo Clinic every quarter and we watched the tumor grow and we dealt with the scary aspects of that. But he was still touring full time. His solo band had really taken off. And so even though he would have some episodes and fatigue and occasional medical emergencies, for the most part in the early years, I we were gifted a juicer by this saxophonist named Bill Evans, and I started juicing mostly green vegetables every single day. I would bring that on the road. And one of my jobs when we were touring was whenever we reached a city, I would go to the grocery store and I would get all of the healthy groceries and stock up the tour bus. And we would always make sure we had a mini fridge in the hotel room so that we could eat healthy on the road. When I met him, he was eating no vegetables, pretty much all meat, potatoes, dairy, fried food, and a couple of pots of coffee a day. So I got him, more vegetables into the diet and down to decaf. So in the early years, we were doing Pilates together multiple times a week. We were meditating together, eating healthy together. He was like this eager student that whatever I introduced health wise, he was all about it. We went gluten free and dairy free. And that really worked for us for quite some time. And then it was probably about 2016 when things started getting really serious. He started getting recurrent aspiration pneumonia, where the food goes into your lungs instead of your stomach. And his vocal cords, the tumor pressed against a nerve that paralyzed one of his vocal cords. So the vocal cords push our voice out and they push our food down into our stomach. And when one got paralyzed, it couldn't close. So it wound up leaving him with a whisper. And we would say, his best friend would say, our songbird lost his song. And the emergencies started happening more frequently. And I just stopped taking care of myself completely. And it's interesting because, on one hand, I think many people feel this way about our youth. On one hand, I'm really grateful that I got to just be so young and so in love. And I loved him so much that caring for him, it gave me purpose and meaning, and it felt like an honor and a privilege. But I know now that I was also conditioned in childhood to put everybody else's needs ahead of my own and to find purpose and meaning in caring for others. And that my needs seemed more of like an obligatory burden. So I, one of my greatest passions in life is saying to people, when you are caregiving and you think, I just don't have the option to take care of myself. He's having constant medical emergencies. The oxygen machine is breaking. He had a liquid bag of food hooked to a port in his arm that's how he was getting his food. And that machine would break in the middle of the night. And it was just constant. He was having seizures and falling, and it was really just constant. And I was about 26, 27, 28 when this all starts getting really intense. So I'm young. My brain hasn't even fully developed yet,
Self-up's right. Yeah.
and so I remember thinking, what I did was I went to Target and I got like 5 tank tops, the same tank top in 5 colors, and a few pairs of leggings. And I just wore the same outfit every day. And I ordered a big box of these pre-made smoothies. And every day I would just add milk to the smoothie and blend it up. And that's what I ate. I lost a ton of weight. And by the end, I was collapsing. Like, I just kept falling. This is before I'd been diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I didn't know that I have a connective tissue disorder and really need to be caring for myself. So what I always say to people is I totally understand the feeling and the reality of I don't have the option to care for myself because I'm caring for him or her, but eventually it will catch up to you. Eventually you will have to care for yourself anyways. And we are as worthy of care as the person that we're caring for is. Sometimes there were times that he could have I could have allowed him to have a little more discomfort to give myself a little bit of comfort, because it was 9 years in May since he died, and my health is still pretty drastically impacted by putting my needs on the back burner during caregiving years.
Yes. I have a neighbor here whose husband was on dialysis for a long time, and he passed away right around Christmas. And then 2 months ago, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancers because she was ignoring the pain and ignoring that she couldn't walk and all of those things. And so it's been a real issue. Um, and I see it in people that when we don't take care of ourselves, and so there's that thing of I got to take care of that other person, And so I don't take care of me, but we don't realize there's a big consequence in that. That I think that if Gregg would have known that you were going to pay that level of price, he would have told you no.
I've thought about this a lot. Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. There were times, without, I won't go too detailed into some of the private stuff, but there were times when he was in a wheelchair and where he would break down crying and say, it makes me emotional still. He would say, I'm taking your youth and this isn't fair. And I love that man madly. I mean, he was my, sun, moon, and stars. And so he did at times bring up, um, and even like when we brought in help at the end, I was not great at delegating, and we really wanted alone time, and I was honestly too burnt out to be delegating. So it yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do believe that spiritually he's with me and is one of the reasons why I think he's a guardian angel that I for all intents and purposes should not be alive. It really the level of burnout, trauma combined with my health conditions that I already have that were exacerbated, combined with bullying and abuse and media scrutiny, all of it, you know, I'm very grateful to be alive. And I don't want anybody else to let it get that serious.
Yes. You have a level of gratitude and connection to being alive that many people can't even understand. So,
Truly. Truly.
so I kind of imagine while I'm talking to you, I imagine like you're walking up and down all these hills, right? Like, you're like, this thing goes down and then it gets good, right? And so if we were standing at the crest of one of these hills looking forward in your life, what kinds of things do you see coming your way or that are exciting you about moving forward into to Shannon's life?
Thank you for that. I was talking about this in therapy this morning. My therapist literally said to me, because the documentary about Gregory came out this past month and it was really, really emotional. There was a lot of discomfort and old stuff that I thought I had dealt with that came back up, a lot of pain that I've dealt with in the music industry that came up. And I had been doing so well, and it really kind of knocked me on my butt and got me outside of some of those morning and evening routines that I cling to so much, that I rely on. And my therapist said today, she said, Shannon, I always see you on an upward trajectory. And so even if there's a dip, you're not shooting down. You might go into fight or flight or survival mode for a little bit and you dip, but you have foresight on the horizon. So it's such a timely question. I am really finding a lot of purpose in sharing my story and helping other people and shedding some of that perfectionism and the pressures that I had put on myself or felt from others to look or be or speak a certain way. And I have an inner child altar in my home where I have pictures of myself when I was a kid to remind myself, what did Shannon want before the world got its claws in her? So I love making art, being around artists, traveling, being like I was saying, out in the countryside. I know you understand this. I have so many ideas, right? I mean, there's no lack of ideas. It's like whether there's a podcast or a book or an art show or he and I wrote a bunch of songs together that I would still like to flesh out and bring some artists in to make music. I also, to piggyback off what we said a minute ago, I'm so grateful to be alive that I am at this place where I also had a hard fall from my socioeconomic class status. On the ladder, I went from the top down to the bottom. That was a hard fall. And the beauty in that is I'm so grateful. I'm really at this point where I'm grateful for my breath, for my senses, my sight, my hearing, the spices on my spice rack, And so, what that has meant for me now and looking forward is that no matter what I do, whatever creative endeavor, professional endeavor, relationships, travels, I'm so present in my body and filled with such gratitude that I have surrendered to the divine's plan for me, so that as long as I'm listening to my intuition, as long as I am continuing to practice keeping my heart light, and for me, that has meant I had to feel and express and embody the rage and the anger at a lot of the injustice and abuse and trauma that I dealt with as a young widow. I had to feel all of that to then get to the forgiveness where I have forgiveness for the people whose actions caused me the most harm. And what that's done is lightened my heart. It's made all of my physical and mental health condition symptoms better
Mhm.
so that I can be more tuned into what the divine is saying that the divine wants for me. So I feel really, really excited about the messages that I'm getting and the serendipitous. You are one of them. These serendipitous connections
Right.
that as long as I was going to say, as long as I stay open to what is for me and I meet it with courage and vulnerability and gratitude and faith. I said to Gregory shortly before he died, I said, "What am I going to do without you?" And he said, so matter of factly, "The universe is going to guide you." And he didn't mean it. He wasn't just brushing it off.
No,
He
no,
really meant it.
yeah, yeah. And so he's I think a great example of how somebody who's tuned in and spiritually gifted on all these very deep, sensitive ways that the noise of the universe just ate him up. And that brings tears to my eyes because I see it and I witness it. And we lived in the same neighborhood as he did when he was very little in Sarasota. My brother remembers hearing them play in their garage like when they weren't a thing. You know, they were just learning how to play actually, which I think is hysterical. And in the sense that because Sarasota, the circus town, you know, there's up performers, you know, kind of everywhere. We were racing boats, so we were in and out of that scene. But it was like the world will take the sensitive, gifted, amazing spiritual people, and if it's allowed, we'll eat them up, you know, and then just keep on going. And but what they don't understand is like when the documentary came out and the work through you that was impacted by him, right? That legacy and that healing and that brightness continues. And the noise of the world might look like it won, but it didn't.
Mm.
And and in that I have hope.
That reminds me, I wanted to say earlier, I love how you worded that, and it is hopeful, is when you were asking if I knew about autism and
Mm-hmm.
CPTSD and stuff when he was alive. One thing that really stands out to me now that I do know
Okay.
is when you look at famous musicians, they are doing things, they are accommodating sensitivities in ways that the public sees as cool. So they wear sunglasses inside, and that's seen as like a cool rock star thing. I see it as they're sensitive to the light. A lot
Yes.
of them are very protective of their hearing. They're sensitive to sound. Always, he bought me a big bucket of earplugs that we kept just when I was making smoothies in the morning. He was like, "You need to be protecting your hearing. I can see that you're sensitive to the sound of the blender." Um, they hyper focus on playing their instruments in ways that I didn't know that word, hyper focus, right? They might forget
Right.
to eat, forget to go to the bathroom for hours, just hyper focusing on their instruments. And a lot of them notoriously have turned to drugs and alcohol. And so I'm really protective of him and the narratives around him. I hear people talk about his drug usage. A lot of times people glamorize it or laugh about it. I remember when he was so messed up, he couldn't even lift his head up on the organ, but he still played the same, the best show that day. Ha 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 ha. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a man who went through a lot of trauma and abuse and loss and hard things and was highly sensitive and gifted and was doing the best that he could to cope. And I don't find it, humorous or glamorous. And I always like to.
Well, and yeah, and he showed up
He did show up.
in a world that was so superficial that they couldn't see past all of that, and they thought it was funny. I mean, I've traveled with a couple artists, and one of the reasons why I was with them was because of substance use, and um, wanted somebody that was spiritually with them, to kind of like I was like their connection, and people would, I could hear it in the crowd and stuff every once in a while, comments, and I'm thinking, y'all are missing it. And I remember friends of mine saying, don't get too close to those people, meaning those musicians. Don't get too close to them because they'll hurt you. And I'm like, first of all, they don't have power to hurt me. But second of all, I know the rules. It's okay. And that's not what I'm doing, because I really believe that the gifted musicians like Gregory, and like a lot of the people I've worked with, um, I think all of them, but I'm especially this other echelon. There's another level of sensitivity that overexcitability is what makes them so special and powerful and famous.
Yes.
And the very fame it's like a scorpion comes back and bites them if they're not careful.
Right.
And often the legacy, well, his legacy will live on forever. I mean, I still know people who go, oh my God, he was the best ever in the world. And I'm like, yeah, he's really great. Yeah, that's true. And it was like he's here today. And it's like you said, it's been 9 years. And I think that in and of itself is beautiful, because I don't think that when he was young learning how to play, maybe he did, you could tell me maybe if he did, but I don't think that he would, when he was young, trying to figure out how he could make such a legacy that it would never die. I think he was doing his craft and being creative and following that God-given gift, and out of that came the legacy. But I don't think the drive for the legacy came first.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's that idea that most artists say, which is I create art because I have to.
Right.
I
You
have.
can't not.
He saw BB King playing and saw that big piece of furniture, that, the Hammock B3 organ, and it was like, oh, I have to do that. Um, and he was so sensitive. And I've talked before about how he shared that it wasn't until he got older and he was playing the guitar and instruments that he started getting more approval from the other kids. But he actually, like so many sensitive people, gifted people, artists, he got teased a lot. He was a really pretty blonde boy in the 50s, where he would rip out the seams of his jeans and sew them back up to be tighter at a time when that was not the fashion. He did things differently.
Mhm.
And one thing that I always wish people knew about him, because it's one of my favorite things about him, and it's aligned with what we're talking about, both with being gifted and sensitive and also dealing with the noise of the world, is he was so in touch with nature in a way that I relate, where we have relationships with the trees and the plants and the breeze. And he would talk about the key that a bird was singing in. And part of that feeling alien from other people was, he and I would talk about how we remember being young and being like, talking to other people or our parents, isn't it just so overwhelming that we live in this world where we get oxygen from trees and there's the womb of the ocean? Oh my gosh, it's so big. And a lot of people around us would be like, no, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. And that is when sometimes substances, when everybody around you is kind of like, you're weird, then you.
Well, because sometimes you have to, whatever substance people find that helps dull that enough to be able to function.
Yeah.
It starts out as I'm in pain because I'm not functioning and I think I'm an alien. I said that 1,000 times in high school, and you have to numb it somehow, and you don't know that it's going to bite you in the butt. You're just trying to function.
Totally.
And it didn't start as, oh, I'm going to screw my life up in the best way I can.
No
It
way.
started with, I'm trying to function in a world that doesn't understand me, and I don't even understand it all the way.
Completely. And the grief, I mean, I went through it myself because he lost his dad when he was a toddler. His father was murdered. And then when his brother died in their early 20s. So now he's a gifted, sensitive person with grief on top of it. So people already didn't understand him. And now and we're such a grief illiterate culture and a trauma misinformed, uninformed culture. And again, this was, late 60s, early 70s. I guess Dwayne died in 71. And that's what I went through. I just, nobody understood what the heck was going on with me. There's like autistic burnout, caregiver burnout, trauma, sensitivity, the grief, all of it, coming down and nobody around. I always say like the music industry is a business. It is a
Yes.
business. It was very heartbreaking for me as a young person to learn how much of a business it is, because I think a lot of us have this idea that it's a bunch of artists, hippies sitting around kumbaya playing, their guitars in the front porch. And by the time I came around, they had been a band for decades. So it really was a business. And he was one of the faces and names of a brand where a lot of people are connected to that brand, their livelihoods, their careers, the way that they support their families, all connected to this brand. That was obviously a lot of pressure. He said that he felt, I call him Gregory. He said that he felt that Gregg Allman had become one word, like Gregg Allman was it just a brand name,
Yes.
and he really, he had to navigate how to be himself in the business.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I know that crosses the line. And then there's all these different pieces to it. And I'm so excited to see how you bring the beauty of all of your story. And then there's way more, of course, forward into a way that actually, like, I see it as this, I'm getting goosebumps. I see it as this great light, like this, like when you're going to like the fair or whatever, there's a spotlight that's just up in the sky and like, where's the beginning of a light? That's kind of what it reminds me of. And so it's so beautiful. And I'm so glad you got to spend time with me today.
That
And
means so
and
much to
and I know y'all are really loving everything that Shannon's saying. So check out her bio in the show notes and links and stuff like that if you want to follow her. And I have a couple final questions before we end the show. And the first one is, because you've traveled so much and you have such great experiences, what is the most memorable food you've ever eaten?
Oh my gosh, most memorable food. Uh, I had this, I think it's pronounced omakase sushi in London that was so exquisitely delicious. I teared up because I didn't know that the palate could even experience flavors like that.
Wow.
Just, just incredible.
Mm, amazing. Many people on the show that I've interviewed and asked that question to have mentioned food in London,
Oh,
Indian food
mm,
and sushi and things like that. And it's like, of all the places everybody's been, it shows up frequently. So I just did an interview not long ago with somebody, and his food was in London. So I just think that's a really cool synchronicity. Anyway, so the final question is, if we were going to put a billboard up that the whole world was going to see with Shannon Allman's message on for the world,
mm.
what is your message that you would like on the billboard?
Even when you feel most alone, God is with you. The divine loves you. This might be a little long for a billboard, but every main character in the Bible and most spiritual texts and heroes' journeys, their step into their highest calling, their step into their divine path was preceded by betrayal by the people they trusted the most, financial devastation, health devastation, homelessness, tragedy, loss. So I do not mean to say that you have to find the silver lining while you're going through it. I surely couldn't at the time. But if you can just keep choosing to be here each moment, breath by breath, day by day, eventually all of your worst tragedies and heartbreak and feelings of being forsaken, abandoned, isolated, forgotten can usher in a, a, a life of divine presence. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Before I let you go, before you let me go, I do want to talk about your book real quick.
Sure.
You have a sec?
Yes, I was going to ask you if there's anything you wanted to say before we
Yes.
ended the recording. So go right on ahead.
Please, please. So anybody who knows me knows I talk about the book Women Who Run with the Wolves
Mhm.
all the time. So much that I just call it the Wolves book. And I've told all my friends that this is my new Wolves book. I've just started it. And I mean, you can see this is the kind of like every single line is highlighted and underlined. I said to my therapist, who I encouraged to get it this morning, I said, I've always said there's no blueprint or guidebook for me on how to live my life with the way that my brain is wired. And that I have always been a high achiever and I've always been smart. I did well in school and I have all of this knowledge and wisdom and like expertise that I've learned, but I struggle so much in this world. This world was not designed, the 9 to 5, the corporate world, it just was not designed for my mind or my body and or my soul, specifically care for the neurodivergent soul. And I was already following your content and appreciating your content, but I didn't know the depth of your background. So I love the opening. I was like, whoa, I had no idea what you've done all of these years. And I said to my therapist this morning, I feel like I have the guidebook now where, a lot of gifted people and autistic people struggle with suicidality. And while I'm not in that place now, I've struggled with suicidal ideation pretty much my whole life. And what we talked about is how there's a kind of suicidal ideation, which is it's not that I want to die, it's that I can't cope with my life the way that it is right now, and I don't see a way forward. And how much messaging I have gotten my whole life of you're smart, so why can't you just do this? You are lazy and entitled and spoiled if you're not willing to do XYZ, get this job, etc. And you, I mean, like I wish, I mean, this, do you mind if I read a quick passage?
Yeah, it's fine.
Neurodivergent individuals often need genuine interest in a task to fully engage with it. This isn't laziness or lack of willpower, it's neurological. For many with ADHD, autism, or gifted sensitivities, the brain lights up and sustains attention when something is truly compelling. But when something feels irrelevant or imposed, engagement feels almost physically impossible.
Yes.
And it's that kind of stuff that culture, family of origin, society will tell us that we are lazy and entitled or broken or damaged when you have given a blueprint of how to work with our mind and soul. So I can't thank you enough for that.
Oh, you're welcome. That just means so much to me because I am, as I was writing it, and I'm like, oh, some of these chapters are so short, and what about this? But I feel done with that chapter. It's not, or whatever. And several people have said this is like the Tao Te Ching in the Bible. This is like a really amazing. And that guy who said that was a musician too. And I'm like, wow. I was just writing from my heart, hoping that one person would would feel it. So thank you for sharing that. That means so much to me.
It's the kind of I said to my therapist this morning about the book, I said, when those dark shadows come, because they will, I will go through dark times again. And when I feel that I am too broken or too alien to provide for myself and create a life of safety, I, like many people I know who are gifted neurodivergent, we have a fear of winding up homeless. because so many of us do actually wind up homeless. And this book, I was like, oh, this is how Diane's figured out how to do it in the world. And it is a buoy for me. And now, as I am in approaching middle age, I think about the other children and people that, like, you're giving me the inspiration to learn how to help other people too. Like, that I have a purpose to stay here on earth, what I'm doing to help people. That, like, turns out we're gifted, not broken.
That's right. It's what's right with you, not what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for being on the show today. And thank you for this conversation. I could talk to you forever.
Likewise. Always.
Right. Okay. And so, everyone, make sure you follow Shannon. And I hope that you enjoyed the show a little bit like I did. I have goosebumps running all over me. And so remember to keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star. You're here on purpose with a mighty purpose. So go out there and let your light shine. Let your freak flag fly, as they say, and give yourself permission to be the real you. Tell your story in a meaningful way. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, this is Diane and Shannon saying, be well. Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episodes, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.